Good morning. My name is Pavani, and this is my husband, Vajra. It's not blocking. We're very happy to be with you this morning. Many years ago, when I was living in the Palo Alto community, Swami Kriyananda came for a visit, as he often did, and I had the opportunity to be able to talk with him just for a few minutes about dance, and it was the first time that I'd had that opportunity. And I was just a few years on the path, so of course was very in awe of him and nervous about talking to him. And the moment came and we stepped aside from the group, and I was very wide-eyed and eager and said, I want to know all your thoughts about dance. And his response was, well, what do you think? And it was not at all what I expected. I think he could see my eyes glazing over. And so he very kindly just went on and shared with me a few of his thoughts. And I've thought about that a lot over the years. And I think that he was trying to teach me not to be too passive and to have confidence in my ideas. And the reading today talks about this balance between, standing on our own 2 feet, having that inner strength, putting out energy, having confidence, as well as being receptive and open to guidance and connecting with the divine, not coming from our egos. And I've observed that it seems like all of us either fall on one side a little more or the other. We may tend to be very receptive and open and always asking, Master, what do you want? But we may not put out the energy needed to actually draw guidance and grace. And then there's those of us that are used to making things happen and putting out energy, and we may do that until something blocks us, and then suddenly remember, oh, I'm supposed to be including God in this. So it takes both energy and receptivity together to draw inspiration, to draw grace, to draw guidance. And when Jyotish and Devi were here, they told a story about Swami that I'd never heard before, and it illustrates an additional element besides or along with receptivity and putting out energy or inner strength that is critical in terms of being able to keep our energy flowing. And the story takes place when Swami was living at his parents' house in Atherton. It's when he was first teaching in the Bay Area. And he came home one night, and his mother was concerned. He looked exhausted. He was, feeling, I don't know if stressed is the right word, but, he had a lot on his mind. And she said, and he was supposed to teach a class that night, and she said, well, maybe you shouldn't teach the class. You should just rest. You're so exhausted, as a mother would. And of course, you know what Swami said. No, I have to teach the class. People are counting on me. She said, well, then at least why don't you go take a rest? So he said, all right. So he went into his room and laid down. And he was feeling all of that exhaustion and all of the things that he was needing to do, the phone calls and the letters and the writing and the teaching, and it was all weighing on him, and he decided, instead of resisting it, to just completely accept all of it. And after about half an hour, he got up, and he felt completely rejuvenated. Went and taught his class and recounted later that it was one of the best classes he ever taught. And we all know that acceptance is an important part of the spiritual path, but what's fascinating to me is that it completely released his energy. It's so easy for us to be resistant to what's in front of us and to how we're feeling, because we know how we should feel, right? We know how we prefer things to be. Mainly as devotees, maybe we're feeling unwilling. We know we should feel willing. And then on top of that, we're upset that we don't feel willing. And so it sets into motion all these cross currents that block our energy. And yesterday, when I was thinking about this talk, I became aware of a situation that triggered me. It was all those things, all those cross currents started going, and I had the opportunity to practice acceptance. And it was actually quite challenging. But I'll just share with you some of the things that are helpful. One is, as soon as that moment happens where those cross currents are going on and you're feeling confused, in turmoil, you're in a situation that's escalating, to stop and just relax. Relax the body, especially relax the mind and the heart. And then to step back. And what stepping back does is it helps us disengage from that inner turmoil, at least for a moment. Jyotish described an interesting practice that can help in being able to step back, and that is if you talk about yourself in the third person. So instead of saying, I'm feeling anxious, I would say, Pavani is feeling anxious. And that is it's an interesting thing to try, because it helps give that a little bit of distance and helps us not identify so strongly with the feelings that are going on. And then actually the most helpful thing I found yesterday was offering everything to Divine Mother. And that ultimately is what we're trying to do. And in order to do that, there has to be a certain level of trust for us to be able to really accept what is. We have to trust that everything is happening as it should be happening. See if there's anything more I want to say about that. And that's really the sweetest part, because I found that it took me a while, but when I was able to accept and just say, Divine Mother, I trust you, then my energy was freed up and I felt much better about the situation. And that's a mantra that I practice when I start to feel anxious, is Divine Mother, I trust you. In the book, Om, the Melody of Love, written by Bharat, he writes, because one often has no idea why certain tests come to him, he needs to face his challenges with strength and courage, faith that God knows what he is doing, and courage to embrace and work with what he sends. Contact God in meditation so that you can experience him as a God of love and joy. Then when trials and tribulations come, you will be able to fully trust him and know that he is with you. God bless you.
Good morning. I'd like to read from Whispers from Eternity. Tune us that we may hear thy voice. Volumes of thy Savior voice resound through the loudspeaker of every loving heart. The voice of thy wisdom roams through the ether of space, seeking everywhere hearts that are tuned to ecstasy. Sadly, thy warning sermons pass unheard by souls deafened with the static of sense pleasures. O divine broadcaster, tune our souls, long distracted by the static of our indifference. Fine-tune us with the delicate touch of soul perception. Grant us the privilege of hearing thy magic melodies in the ecstasy of divine awakening. We hear every week, truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. And in a way, that really sums it up. We listen, we come every week, and different ministers come and share what they have to say, their thoughts, their inspirations, their stories. Many of the choice stories we hear again and again. Over the years, some of Swami's stories were repeated many, many times. But when they're heard with an ear towards realizing the truth, towards realizing oneness with that truth within ourselves, it takes on a new significance every time. And that's the opportunity that we have with the teachings, really, no matter what form they come, no matter how they come, no matter how many times you've heard it, every time is an opportunity to hear it more deeply, to take it deeper within, to experience it on a deeper level. So if this doesn't turn out that well, don't blame me. Just kidding. Talking about, it was particularly taken with the notion of standing on your own 2 feet and what does that mean and how do we get there? And 3 aspects of it came to mind. One is acceptance, one is guidance, and one is attunement. And when I thought of acceptance, well, there's really 3 parts of it: accepting who you are, accepting what you're doing, and accepting that you're doing the best you can. And when I thought of accepting who you are, for reasons unknown to me, what came to me was Popeye and his spiritual teaching, I am what I am, and that's all what I am. Well, there you have it, in a nutshell. You know, if we can take that in and recognize that here we are, you know, God, this is what you gave me. And the key to that is not making comparisons. That's really all there is to it. The only difficulty we ever have is when we start making comparisons and we think, oh, I like what they are better. Or, oh, I think it should be different. Jyotish and Devi told the story of when they were in India, which is a pretty intense place to be. They asked Keshapa, who had been there some years and seemed to have fully adapted to being there. How do you do it? How did you manage to seem so comfortable with all of this, the craziness of what India is, and at the same time, the deep spirituality that permeates that country? And he said, well, I finally stopped making comparisons. I stopped thinking that, oh, it shouldn't be like this. It should be like what it is in the United States, in my country, in my culture, in my familiar territory. When he let go of that and just took everything that came to him as it was, the difficulties went away. That you're doing what you should be doing wherever you are, that's exactly where you're supposed to be. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you should accept it passively. It may be that what you need is to put out energy to change your situation If that's the guidance that you feel like this is unacceptable and you can feel that, we'll talk about guidance in a little bit too. But even if that's the case, the process of changing the circumstances is exactly what you need to be experiencing at that time. So wherever you are, there you are, and that's your starting point. That's your stance. If you're going to stand on your own 2 feet, you have to accept that your 2 feet are right here at this moment, at this time. They're not over there somewhere where I'd like them to be. You got to start right here and right now. And the other part is I'm doing the best that I can. You've probably heard it before, but it's such a beautiful story of, again, Jyotish and Devi getting a scathing letter from Guru Bhais about pretty much they were doing everything wrong, and taking it to Swami and saying, are they right? Are we blowing it that badly? And Swami just looked at them and said, you're doing the best you can for who you are. And not feeling quite satisfied with that answer, they then said, well then, were they wrong to say all these things? And he thought for a moment and he said, they're doing the best they can for who they are. And he smiled at them and said, and I'm doing the best I can for who I am. So there you have it. We're all doing the best we can for who we are. If we were there already, we wouldn't be here. So it works against us to be condemning ourselves for not doing well. The best we can do is to accept that we're doing the best we can. Guidance. The easiest way to find yourself, or to find anything for that matter, is to get directions, right? That's why we have these smartphones. I used to have the hardest time getting around Portland. Portland is not a driver-friendly city, I can tell you. I used to have a Thomas guide, some old-timers, which was an analog smartphone of sorts, you know. Page through and find the map. Except the map didn't tell you Portland's secrets about, oh yeah, but that's a one-way street going the wrong way and you can't get there. Well, now we have smartphones that tell us how to get around, for the most part, except occasionally when they play tricks on us. Like the time my smartphone put me on my favorite street in downtown Portland where it's one way and there's 2 lanes and you're not supposed to be in that lane because it's a public transportation lane and you can't turn left, and in order to turn right you have to get in the lane that you're not supposed to be in. At that point, Siri, or whatever you want to call your particular smartphone, went, oops. Hello, talk to me. I finally got off and she resumed the conversation. So you can't count on Pavani had a great experience too when she was down in the Bay Area. Twice she got on the Bay Bridge, and as soon as she got on the Bay Bridge, Siri said, make a U-turn. Siri, we need to talk. So anyway, but even to make Siri work, the first thing you have to do is you have to ask for directions. So if you want guidance, you have to ask for it. God, what do I do here? Help me. Open yourself to that guidance. The second part is be open to receiving it. So we've got prayer and we've got meditation. They kind of go together that way. Because meditation is opening yourself to receiving that guidance, and not just opening yourself to what goes on in your mind, but really opening yourself. Because God can come to you in a whole lot of different ways. God can come to you through a thought that pops into your mind. God can come to you from a friend or a counselor. God can come to you from a casual passerby who says the right thing at the right time. God can come to you through a billboard. Remember LA's story? Steve Martin got a lot of his guidance from a billboard. Well, it can be like that. Those moments when you've got a question and all of a sudden Divine Mother gives you the answer right there in big 4-foot high letters, and you realize it. You know, you're wondering, I wonder if I should talk to that person or not. I don't know. And they walk into the room. Say, okay, here we are. So what's new? okay, I guess that's the indication I needed. And the follow-up for that process of learning about guidance is, how did it turn out? Sometimes we have clear guidance. Oh, Divine Mother wants me to do this. Divine Mother wants me to have that ice cream cone. I can feel it. Maybe she does, or maybe not. So you have to be able to evaluate the results. That's where the discrimination part comes in. We talked about discrimination in the affirmation today. And Swami says that to evaluate what happened takes two things: discrimination and humility. Swami says of humility that it is the secret of wisdom. And he goes further to say, what is humility? Humility is quite simply openness and self-honesty. So how really did it turn out? Not just how would you like it to have turned out and convince yourself that really it turned out that way, sort of, but just honestly, candidly, how did it turn out? Not only in terms of did you get the result you wanted, but how does it feel? Does it feel right? Sometimes you get exactly the result you intended. Boy, I made them feel bad. But what happens inside? You don't feel so good. So is that really the result you wanted? And that's where the openness and self-honesty comes into the picture. The other part of that is giving God the credit, good or bad, however it turned out, whether it turned out well or whether it turned out poorly. Let God be the doer. You don't need to take the credit for it, nor do you need to take the blame for it. Many of us have the tendency to be happy about giving God the credit, but wanting to hold on to that blame all to ourselves. Again, it doesn't help. Quite simply, it doesn't help. What helps is being open and honest. Okay, we blew that one, didn't we? Well, we won't do that one again. That's enough. That's enough. And then attunement, the purification ceremony. Open your heart to me and I will enter and take charge of your life. That's a reality. That's a promise. That's not a platitude. Open your heart to me. Put your attention on God. Open to God's guidance. Put your focus there. Swami talks about starting with the truths of the masters. I mean, for me, that's what hit me when I read Autobiography of a Yogi. This man knows the truth. That's a good starting point. Starting with the truths of the masters. And then find that truth within yourself. So when what you're experiencing as the truth, what you're knowing as the truth, resonates with that, that's a pretty good indication that you're moving in the right direction. And again, understanding that God is the doer. If you remember when Swami had been with Master for, I don't know, a year or so, and he was feeling very good about the spiritual progress that he could feel that he was making. And he overheard Master saying to another group of disciples, "See how I've changed Walter." And there was a part of him that was a little surprised because, I mean, he'd been putting out all this effort. Yes, we have to make all this effort. But we put out the effort, and what that's really doing is opening ourselves up to be changed by the divine. Or maybe another way of looking at it is for that energy to be awakened within us. But it's that experience of the connection, that awakening of the connection between the divine within us and the divine that is out there, channeled by the masters. That's why we have masters. Yogananda didn't have disciples by his own description. They were God's disciples. He was just acting as a channel, an awfully good channel. So focusing on that, because it's easier to focus on someone who's been here in the body. Swami channels Master's energy beautifully. tribute to discipleship. So you attune yourself to Swami, you attune yourself to Yogananda, and in that way, you are attuning yourself to God and awakening the divine that is within you. Each one of us is a unique expression of the divine, and standing on your own 2 feet is really the process of discovering that expression and then sharing it with everyone. Blessings.